This project is the result of an opportunity and a concept joined together. The concept was that a few years ago, Jean-Pierre recorded some saxophone for me. He's collaborated on a lot of my projects. And for one specific song, I asked him, why don't you try the tenor saxophone? Because he's mainly, and by his own admission, he's renowned as an alto player, soprano player as well, but a little bit less of the tenor, although he did play it over his lengthy career. But I asked him, would you be able to record a tenor, which he did, on a piece? And I thought the result was so amazing. I said, Jean-Pierre, what do you think of the idea of having an album featuring you on the tenor? And he was up for it, and he said, well, that's great. I don't think I've released an album just with me on the tenor, so let's try it. So that was the idea. That was a few years ago, and I started to work on this slowly, without a tight, specific deadline. Then, early 2023, roughly, Gary called me and he said, hey, I have a brand new drum kit by Pearl to my specification, a Pearl Crystal Beat, which is a transparent kit, really cool. And it's stored in Dock Street Studio. And he said, the drum kit is there. If you have anything, I'm available to record. So you need great performers to perform your music. Otherwise, your music stays like notes on a piece of paper or on a program, and it's not really alive. It goes without saying that I didn't need much persuasion. If Gary says, I'm available to record something, certainly I'd jump on this opportunity. I was thinking about what sort of music I should record. So Gary and I recorded an album which was released in 2016 called Sphere. And I thought that's a great opportunity to do a second kind of chapter to that first album. And I thought, why not join the concept of having Jean-Pierre on the tenor saxophone and have Gary on drums, and then merge those two great musicians, compose all the music and perform the guitar and bass tracks. So this is really the genesis of this project.
Well, I've had the pleasure and thrill to be able to participate on Antoine's recordings for quite a few years now, and there are a good number of albums where I've been featured as drummer or keyboardist too. Sometimes both, sometimes just keyboards, sometimes just drums. And it's always a real pleasure, fulfilling pleasure, from the point of view that his material is extremely strong and always very challenging. And it's two aspects that I really enjoy.
Well, what I think about Antoine's project, I've been, involved in a few projects, but this particular one it's always a challenge, metrically, harmonically, and he's got always these, melodic contour with big leaps and stuff. So it's a good challenge. So it puts me, on the line, and it's pretty good. I enjoy it very much.
People may have noticed now that I have a lot of great drummers on my projects, and it's something that, first of all, I'm a fan of drummers. I think that, like Alan Ellsworth used to say, the drummer makes the band. I think it's a little bit of maybe a funny thing to say, but I think it's true. A great drummer can enhance the music. It can make a huge difference on a project. So over the years, I had the privilege to have great drummers play on my projects, and all my demos have composed drum parts, as opposed to you take a beat and you just copy it for 100 bars. It's very specific. So especially when I perform the bass part, I want to make sure the drums and the bass lock in together, and we have something that really makes sense musically. So the drums and the bass really need to lock in. So it ends up being very specific drum parts. But then when I work with a drummer, my advice to them is that you're the drummer and really you're in charge of that department. So my parts are in a way a suggestion. Sometimes there's no way around it. The drummer needs to probably play the part the way I've programmed it, because it works so well with the music. But sometimes, they can be let loose and just do whatever they want. So there is a lot of freedom within the music. And a lot of drummers go to gigs or studio commitments and might have heard many times, don't overplay. So this is something that drummers never hear from me, because That's the opposite, actually. I'm not saying you should overplay just for the sake of overplaying, but I love exciting drum parts, and I want drummers to be completely free to play whatever they feel with the music. I mean, I don't have to tell Gary this sort of thing because he knows what I like, but I always re-emphasize it. And if you listen to Gary on this project, he really was let loose, and his playing is absolutely exciting and really fun. I mean, we have a common love for Tony Williams, and I really like a drummer that takes that approach, not wanting to copy Tony Williams and copy his fills, or it's more the philosophy, the approach to drumming where you are let loose, and in fact, when you listen to this album, you realize that there might not be two bars of drums that are actually identical, and it's okay because it completely serves the music, and that music means to be exciting, and it is a jazz fusion album.
There's a particular method in Antoine's writing that actually I find in very few people, in that he really contemplates and structures drum parts in very much a considered way, in a way kind of unique to him. Actually, it reminds me of some of the early or mid to later 80s when I used to record with Alan Holdsworth. I would take the ball and run with it on invitation by Alan to really construct beats that he felt were interesting as a kind of counter event to the compositions as a whole. And that was a challenge I really loved, and I developed a long way through those challenges. Antoine seems to feel very much the same way, although I don't think he's a drummer as such, but he certainly thinks like one, and his instinct is to invent such counter events to musical structures that actually I find very few other people tend to do. They come to me and say, well, you've done this and this and this, and it'll be no problem for you to do what you hear. But with Antoine, there's a very distinct and characterful and hugely contributory counter series of events by way of drums, and he writes those into the music. They're all written, and they're all kind of, they lend themselves to the overall character of every composition he puts together, even though some of them I sometimes can't play. So I take them as a blueprint or basically remodel them a little bit so that I can either play them or feel them more, or what's conducive to be able to play on a kit. But this is a very interesting aspect of Antoine's music.
One thing that is now common with all my projects is that the drums are recorded at the end, which is unusual, possibly compared to other styles of music, but for me it's something I've been doing for quite a while now, and more and more it completely makes sense. So that means in this project my solos, Jean-Pierre's solos, were at the time recorded against a program part, and then Gary played at the end his own part and really interacted with the soloists. And it shows in the music. And I don't think it would be as efficient if it was done the other way around. I always believe it was a good approach, and more than ever, when I listened to the album, I said, well, it's amazing how Gary knew the solos in advance, and he could interact and play really in a way that it supports the solo, and there's a conversation going between the drums and the soloist. You can imagine if drums were recorded without any solo, he would have played a certain way, and certainly very differently from what the result is on this project. So really happy about doing this, and I'm going to keep doing it in the future. It works, and I recommend it.
What makes this album so different is a real change, turnaround in Antoine's direction now. Still the same distinct compositions, which are very familiar as being Antoine's, but we have a great player by the name of Jean-Pierre Zanella, who has come in and really turned the whole thing around, given the music such a different character. Still the distinct music of Antoine, but with this very different character of saxophone. And boy, does he play. is amazing. So it's been a fresh kind of challenge to approach Antoine's music with a difference of this kind of flavor, the lead instrument with saxophone. It's great. I really love it. I loved it during the recording, and I'm really happy about the way it's turned out.
I mainly play alto saxophone and soprano saxophone. And so that's what I did on, previous project with Antoine. And there's one that I actually wanted tenor, and he says, well, I really dig your sound on tenor, so would you mind, how about doing a project with, nothing but tenor saxophone? So to me, it's another challenge. I play tenor sax at home, and, I've been playing for years, but just being on the spot, just playing tenor sax, that was like kind of a nice call. I come from the big band, music, so I would say Pete King, like with Maynard Ferguson, with basically most of the band was from London. But the really first shot in my arm that really got me started on jazz is John Coltrane, obviously, like any saxophonist, that plays jazz, I think has John Coltrane as an influence. And then later on, I would think Mike Brecker, definitely for, the fusion and that kind of I would say synthesis of jazz language, rock and funk language. So I would say these are the main two that basically are still, with me. And, Chris Potter and, name it, Dave Liebman, there's so many of them, Sonia Rollins. They're always around, somehow, I think it's like music, it's like a little bit like food, depending on your mood. Sometimes, you listen to, but John Coltrane anytime. But, sometimes you feel like listening to that guy, this guy. So basically, but I would say Coltrane, it hurts my Lexus Solar to this day.
Well, Antoine's such a great bass player, and I've always really enjoyed playing with him. And to set about playing with him has never been any problem whatsoever. It just seems to correspond. How we feel together when we play, it's really not a challenge at all. It's easy, it's lovely. The other special thing, of course, about Antoine is his whole guitar area, and the electric lead playing and the solos, but also all the acoustic special stuff that he does with the arpeggios inside the compositions. It's all really special. So given that that's there, we have the saxophone and the drums, and that's it. So there's a lot of space, and really things are very open. There's a lot of air in this record, and you can really hear the musicians breathing in the compositions. I think that it's all really worked out very special and very differently. Fantastic.
So sonically, I'm really happy about how this album came out. David, as usual, did a fantastic job in mixing and mastering this album. For my part, I played a lot of different guitars, classical, acoustic, electric. I probably played more lead guitars than I ever in my instrumental albums before, so I'm really happy about having the opportunity to do that. Composing for this project was really cool as well, because all the melodies are performed on the tenor sax, and you have also sax solo on every song. But when I played the electric guitar as a lead, I had an opportunity to write certain melodies that were interacting with the sax. So the melodies are rarely a unison between the sax and the guitar. There's a counterpoint type of writing there. And sometimes the sax takes the top part and the guitar is harmonized under it, but sometimes within that same line, the guitar goes above the tenor sax. And there's this interplay going on. And I thought that was really cool, kind of a compositional approach, and this is something that I will probably do a lot more in the future. I thought that was really interesting to experiment with that.
I see jazz as like this entity that basically is going to just grab one style, which is Cuban, Brazilian, or rock fusion, and just become a canvas with that style, rhythmically or harmonically. So jazz is like a vast thing. It's really open. As a friend of mine used to say, it's like modern music but rooted in tradition. So whatever the musicians I mentioned, you can always hear like the tradition. Like Chris Potter is a good example, who plays like odd meter and music that's considered more modern, but you always hear like where it comes from. So I think jazz, that's the thing. It's like a bigger language. You can actually use new words, but you see and you hear where it comes from. So to me, jazz is like, it's endless.
I think there's been a real turnaround on this album in terms of the character of Antoine's music now with the saxophone is radically different because there's more air in the sound, there's more space now, there's no kind of harmonic padding to things, and where the guitar ops, which are a big part of Antoine's composing, really are sonorous and very clear and very distinct now, and there's nothing really cluttering up in the sense of harmony. So that's a very different feature on this recording. I'm really enjoying that. That really changes how the drums kind of also come through and punctuate inside of the music. It doesn't kind of hold me back or doesn't hold me down quite so much. So I can be creative in an even more kind of expansive way in a situation like this. So it's very, very nice turnaround and change. It's great.
For me, music composition is about the nature of the chords and the relationship between the chords within a chord progression. That's, to me, the essence of what composing is. Of course, all the other aspects are crucial, the rhythm, the melody, of course. And ironically, it's the melody that people remember. When any type of music, you remember the top melody. That's the reference that if you sing a song to somebody, oh well, that's the melody you will sing. You won't sing a harmony, it's physically impossible. We don't talk in a polyphonic voice. But music composition, to me, it's clearer than ever that it's all about what is the nature of your chord, what's the following chord, what's the relationship between those two chords. And I put a lot of effort into that, and once I have this chord progression, let's say I have a A section, a B section, and maybe a C section, I know that I have the key elements to finalize a piece of music. It's all there. These chords and these progressions have all the information that you need. So as a composer, you came up with a chord progression or a series of chord progressions for a piece. And after that, your role is a role of an arranger. So you can play with tempos, you can play with orchestration, with styles, sonic textures. There's so much you can do, and it's kind of infinite what you can do with it. So in my mind, I don't really compose for a specific ensemble. I'm more interested in the chords and the relationship between the chords, and after that I can do kind of what I want with it. So that means a progression can be then given to a string quartet or a piano solo piece or a song that I will work on with a singer. So to me it's all the same, and this is why some music might have deeper meaning. The key is all in the nature of the chords and the relationship between the chords. Now, melodies are crucial, of course. As I said, it's something that you remember. What I realize in my process is that once I've got the chord progression in place, the melodies come very easily and quickly. And once they're in place, it's very difficult to change them as well. So it's a very interesting process. Bass being my main instrument, I pay a lot of attention to the bass lines in my music, but also I don't play like I want to steal the show or anything like that. I want the bass to perform the root notes and supply what's needed in the basement, because that's the role of the instrument, and it's really important to respect. It doesn't mean that the bass cannot be sometimes exciting and play lines that are noticeable. And sure, some pieces of music can be based on a riff or on a bass line, but I find this kind of writing, and I've done a lot of that in the past, I find this kind of compositional approach kind of limiting. Anything to do with only based on riffs or lines, it gets monotonous, and sometimes there might be some riff approach to my music, but I try really to focus on rich chords and rich progressions.
One thing about the gear, I'm using crystal beat pearl acrylic drums now, and have been for a little while, and they've been a real fresh kind of a change to me in terms of obviously the audio aspect of drums, but also the way they respond to me as a player. Any drummer who's tried these kind of shells up alongside, you know, usual maple wood shells, it's a very, very different character, and it was kind of a chance they took to bring this kit in for this record, because I've always played wooden kits on Antoine's music, but these work very well in the sense that in terms of dynamics they're very different. Their response is very different, and their overall delivery is very, very different. You know, they give me a fresh challenge to as a drummer as to how I can get a particular effect and yet still have my own sound. And these drums have really given me that.
Yeah, I think it's still possible, because otherwise, I mean, jazz would be over, it'd be dead. And then if you look around, there's always new players coming on the scene. And the way I see it's like, you know, I try to be as much myself as possible. So I want to tell a story my way with my own voice, using, you know, elements that basically have been used. And I mean, I cannot say that I'm going to use new elements, because I've been exposed to so much music that it's not like a blank sheet. I'm going to play with new inspiration, like I came out of like some places on earth that I've never heard any music. It could be bird, and that's going to influence my playing, new influences. So basically, I think it boils down to being yourself. You develop, you know, whether technically, melodically, or rhythmically, and you try to be as honest and sincere with your thing, and that's going to go on and on and on as much as like music is being done. I don't think there's any end to that.
He's an engineer of extraordinary difference. He's just an amazing engineer to start with, but what he brought about in the treatment, recording and the mixing, particularly of my drums on albums like Sphere, I think it was 2016 with Antoine, was just a real turnaround, and I really loved the quality and the distinctive sound he gave my kit in the mix, while not losing me, not losing my musical personality, not really changing too much, certainly not in the sense of dynamics. It's all there, but with a very, very different sheen on the kit. And it's not to say that the drums are the only impressive thing about what he does, because he comes out mastering these records with a really, really great quality to them, and one really unique to himself as an engineer.
So the drum tracks were recorded in 2 separate occasions, so 2 different sessions in London. And everything was captured on video, so people can buy a single video file with the whole album if they want to, focusing on Gary's performance. So if you want to watch Gary do his thing on this album, it's all available on my website.
I've been waiting for a long time to do another album with Gary Husband on the drums. His approach is always so bold and unexpected. When you have something like that as an engineer, you need to make sure that every little aspect of the performance comes out properly. So you maybe need to reduce the dynamics and also write the volume a little bit in critical places so that the performance always come out nicely. But with Gary, you really can't do that. When he's playing, he knows exactly when something has to poke out and when something else needs to blend perfectly with the rest of the music. Usually with drummers, it's more like push that out or bring that up. And, I mean, there's only that much space that I can use. And Gary knows that. I believe that the drums make at least 50% of the overall sound of an album. And I know that Antoine agrees with me on this. My usual approach is that I start with the drums, I work on them until I feel we are in a good point, a good place, and then I start adding every other instruments in, and usually it's easier for me to find the right place for every other instrument with the remaining space. Technically speaking, the drums is always the most difficult instrument to work with. They usually have about 20 channels, sometimes more than that, and making sure that every channel is clean and it's working well together, that is what takes most of my time. After I'm done with that, I can then create a template that I can reproduce on other songs if the drums were recorded in the same session. In the case of Quadra Spherium, the drums were recorded in 2 different sessions, and I needed to make sure that the sound doesn't change too much between one session to the other, so that required some extra time. But Gary did an amazing job setting up his kit, and for the bass guitar, I used what I always use. So different versions of Ampeg heads and cabinets that can be found in Amplitude Virtual Amp. Lately we've been using the same virtual amp plus guitar rig for every electric guitar that Antoine's recording. That helps my process quite a bit. Usually Antoine records while composing, and that means that it doesn't really know what's going to happen, what sounds there will be after we have the drums and every other instrument. So what recording with virtual amps is giving us is the chance to go back and, you know, dig in on the amp, change whatever it needs to be changed, even the head or parameters or microphones, everything can be changed. Even when I'm mixing, so probably months or even years in the case of Antoine, after it was recorded. So being able to go back and change these parameters is something that really helps us achieving the best possible result when we are mixing the album. For the sax, Zanella did an amazing job. It was recorded in different sections, but I didn't have any issue with that. I usually treat sax just like a vocal. So I have pretty much the same general treatment of dynamics, de-essing, EQing, saturation, ultimately verbs and delays. Antoine wanted the sax to be up front all the time in this project. So treating it like vocals, I have quite a bit of automation happening with the sax because I need to make sure that it always has the perfect effect for that specific moment. So I'm often changing the verbs that I'm using. Sometimes I need a longer delay, a shorter delay. Whatever's happening needs to follow the song. But I almost never change the tone. So I mix the tone at first, and I usually just use the same exact sound from start to finish of the song. The only change in tones are whatever the performance brought to the song, but it's not me. And the only thing that I do is make sure that the volume is always in the right place and adding verbs, delays, whatever needs to be done to create a perfect space for the instrument around the song. I believe we achieved something really special here, and I hope you enjoy listening to Quadra Spherium just as much as I enjoyed mixing it.
The album is made available on digital and CD formats via my website and many online stores around the world. There are a few products that are exclusive to my online store, including a video file that focuses on Gary's performance that was captured during the recording sessions. I also offer some play-along audio mixes. These include drumless and also versions without the saxophone. These files are provided with a click track and PDFs of the exact same charts used by Jean-Pierre and Gary during the recordings. I also produce a limited amount of sheet music books which feature the drums and saxophone parts. This product is exclusively available at my store. I'd like to thank everyone involved in making this project a reality, especially Gary,
Jean-Pierre, and Davide. Thanks also to everyone who has been supporting my music over the years, and I hope that you'll enjoy this project. Thank you.